You've written a couple of books on autism. Being autistic yourself, I was wondering if you could tell me about like fundamental differences about the mind of a person with autism versus let's say a neurotypical individual.
Well, the fundamental theory of thought for autism is called monotropism. And basically what that means is that my brain does one thing, it does it very intensely, and then when it's done, I can move on and do something else. But I'm not a multitasker. I'm a serial single tasker by any stretch. Autism usually brings with it sensory sensitivities and repetitive behaviors, behavioral issues that compound it. And if they rise to the level where an individual can't moderate or accommodate them in their life, it becomes a disorder. And that's probably 1% to 2% of the population.
What's the biggest benefit of life with autism?
I can bring to bear an incredible amount of focus and dedication on a particular task. And it has to be something I love. It has to be something that's rewarding. It has to be something I can make progress on. And there has to be all these things that are true about it. And it could be like a kid playing with trains. I get that same feeling.
That said, you also said that you struggle with ADHD.
Yeah, a fair bit.
So that's part of the component, like maintaining the focus.
Or actually acquiring the focus is the issue. So I'm very easily distracted. I fall asleep with noise-canceling headphones or I can't fall asleep, that kind of thing. But once I get locked in, I'm very hard to distract. So it's kind of a paradox.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's hard to get into that state.
Okay, what's the biggest challenge of life with an autistic mind?
That I don't know what anybody else is thinking. So I know what I would think about this interaction if I was in your position and I was you.
Yeah.
And that's the best I can do. But I think most neurotypical people have a sense of, well, Lex probably feels this way or that way because he's acting this way and his reactions are this and his facial expressions say this. And that's all kind of lost on me. So I run a little proxy NPC game for everybody I deal with.
So I guess that makes social interaction a little bit complicated.
It can be, yeah. Telephone is especially hard because I rely on a lot of other cues. And when somebody is just on the phone and I just have their voice, there's so much that's implied between people that I miss. And so I'm much better on FaceTime, where if somebody makes a joke, they might smile after. Where on the phone, I don't know if you're being sarcastic or serious and that kind of thing. So
that's probably gotten you into trouble over the years a bit.
Yeah, there's lots of times with my wife too, where there's a certain literalism that comes with autism.
Sure.
And we spent years where she would say something and I'd say, but that doesn't make sense. She goes, you know what I mean? I'm like, no, I know what you said. And I'm not being just combative here. I literally only know what you said. And I don't have that. And I remember we've been in meetings with people and, if there's 3 or 4 people in the meeting and I'm the only autistic person, I'll tell that they've got this communication loop going on. And I have to you got to tell me what's going on because I really don't know what's being said here. So
you told me related to this that there was an early, somewhat awkward encounter with Bill Gates. Can you share the story of that interaction and how autism comes into play here?
Yeah, my very first summer at Microsoft when I got the internship, Bill had all the interns over. I guess it was 20 or maybe 25 of us that got hired that year over to his house for burgers and beers and just chat in the backyard. And of course, it's still Bill Gates, and he's a big enough deal even then that you're a little nervous. And so my manager, Ben, who was sort of my mentor at the time, took me over to introduce me to Bill because he knew him. And he's explaining, this is Dave, he's our intern from Canada, and in the space of 4 months, he's done this feature and disk copy and smart driving, listed off all the stuff I was doing. But I stopped because I'm like, well, actually, it was 3 months. And I had to interrupt them, and they both kind of, what? And they looked at each other, and I realized that was the wrong time to correct the guy. But
yeah, so they bother like little inaccuracies.
Oh, it drive me crazy.
Yeah. And then of course you don't the impact that might have on a casual social interaction. It's not trivial for you to be aware of that.
Yeah, I'm much better than I used to be. Before I didn't know. And I didn't know how injecting a correction meaninglessly into a conversation could impact and make the other person feel. Now I got a better sense of it. But
what advice would you have for folks who have an autistic mind on how to flourish in this world?
In terms of prosperity and finances, the biggest thing I can say is sell what you can do and not yourself. Because if you go into a job interview and you try to wow them with your personality and how amazing you are, it may or may not go well. But if you can go in with your portfolio of work and say, look, here's my GitHub history, and here are the awesome projects I contributed to, and here's the actual algorithm I wrote, and this is what I do, I think you get a lot further with that. So whether you're playing the piano or writing code.
That said, so much of software engineering on large teams has a social component to it, right?
It does, and that was a liability for me.
What have you learned about how to solve that little puzzle?
I think the biggest deficit for me was when I started to manage people, because now you're concerned about their hopes, dreams, aspirations, what motivates them. They have entire lives that are kind of a mystery to me, because I assume they want to be motivated and led and encouraged and compensated exactly as I would.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case. Some people need a lot more affirmation. Some people just want money. Some people want to be in the important meetings and make decisions. But I was largely oblivious to that. And so eventually I had to learn that everybody that you're managing has their own set of incentives and priorities, and they're completely different from what I think they probably are.
So you could, I guess, make things more explicit and just communicate better about, like, ask them about what their interests are.
And that's something I started doing, is overtly asking, because it's hard for me to nudge somebody there. I'm not good with that kind of social dance. So
yeah, part of the social dance is there's a lot of stuff that's unsaid.
mm-hmm.
You can kind of figure out. You can read people. But if that's, with autism, it might be a little bit difficult to do that. And so you have to make things more explicit. Plus, like, sarcasm and satire and humor might be difficult.
Yeah.
I would love to be a fly in the wall of some of your earlier interactions with Microsoft. Some of the greatest engineers have a mind like this. So
Yeah, I've had laptops thrown at me and stuff, and I'm sure it was my own fault. So.
You write about the 10-second autism test. Could you explain how this works?
Yeah, now it's, of course, anything that has two answers has a high error rate. But so what's more important to society as a whole from the people? Is it cooperation or creativity? And if you had to pick one, which is the most important? And most neurotypical people will generally lean towards cooperation, whereas people on the spectrum tend to lean towards creativity as individual problem solvers.
Of course, there's some kind of error rate there.
So if you want to double your precision, you can use the second test, which is you ask, there's a room with 10 chairs, and 6 people come in and sit down in those chairs. How many chairs are left? Now, some people are going to say 4, but I'm going to say 10, because that's how many chairs are still there, literally true. And I'm not being a dick. I'm not trying to be complicated, but that is how my mind works. Yeah. And so when I see that question, it's like, it depends how you answer it.
So how literally you take things.
Yeah. Everything is very literal for me. I remember as a kid, my grandfather was building a planter holder in the kitchen for my mom. And he was using these big angle brackets that I thought were a little overkill. And I said, do you think that'll be big enough to hold the plant? And he says, it'll be big enough to hold a horse. And I was only 5, but I was very confused about why you would bring a horse into your kitchen, why you would put a horse up on a planter, and all of these things. It didn't make any sense to me when obviously it was a figure of speech. But for a lot of my life, I took figures of speech as literal. So,
you mentioned emotional post-processing as a strategy you use to replace social interactions, so you can sort of reverse engineer to help you understand the neurotypical world. I think this is going to be useful to a lot of people. Like, what does that entail? How does that help you?
So if I meet somebody, particularly somebody new, and it's my first couple of interactions with them, it's like even meeting you today, then I will go home later and replay all of the moments where I had choices to make, and probably the most uncomfortable ones first, to find out, what did I do wrong in that moment? What did I miss? What was the other person thinking? How can I improve that kind of situation next time? And do I need to go fix it or make a phone call? That kind of thing in in an extreme case. But, and that's happened a couple times in my life. Like, I had a car restored that my dad had bought new in '69. I still have it. So we've had it 50 years. And about 20 years ago, I had it restored. And it was like a 3-year process of craftsmen working on this car for thousands of hours. And I go out to pick it up, and I'm inspecting the car, and I'm very impressed with the work. And I'm saying, oh, this is nice and this is great and everything else. And then I fly home and write the check, and the car gets delivered. And then I realized probably 10 years later that I had a whole bunch of craftsmen that had worked on my car for 3 years, and I probably should have blown some smoke up their butts about what a great job they did. But I never did that because it's not what I wanted or needed in that moment. And I was completely oblivious to that. So I sent an email to the manager or to the owner of the place, and I said, I don't know if you remember this, but 10 years ago, I picked up my car, and I probably looked unimpressed, but I want you to know that I was very impressed with everything and the quality and everything else. And he wrote back, he's like, I've thought of that moment often. So I'm like, now I'm glad I brought it up.
There's subtle things about human interaction that mean a lot to people. And if you ask them straight up, they might not be able to sort of articulate that, but it means a lot. And when it's off, when something is off, it bothers them.
Right.
But to reverse engineer that, to figure that out for a person who might not sense those little subtleties of human interaction, it's tough.
That's a good point to jump in there too on empathy, because there is some perception in the community that people with autism lack empathy. And I don't think that's the case at all. I can only speak for myself. I feel fairly empathetic. But I think the problem is a communication one, and it works in both directions. Whereas I don't know how you're feeling, so it's hard for me to be empathetic with it until you communicate to me what it is you're experiencing. And then once I have an understanding of what's going on in your head, I can feel incredibly sorry for you. But until then, I'm going to assume you're going to handle it just like I would in your position, in my case, with what I know now.
What advice would you give to people, like on the other side, how they can help you be a better friend or better partner, better colleague? Like how they should communicate with you to help, like give more information?
Yeah, be really specific. And don't assume I'm going to pick up on clues and nuance and subtlety. So if you're trying to nudge me into a particular behavior, you're much better off to say, Dave, this is what you need to do.
Have I failed in any way today?
No, not yet.
All right. What score would you give me at 1 to 10? Am I a 6, a 7? On
7.5.
Communication, 7.5. Floating point. Nice. Masking, you got to tell me what that is. It's a significant experience for many on the spectrum. What is masking? And tell me about any of the experiences you've had with masking.
So masking is, and it's probably not the right way to describe it, but it's the act of acting normal. Mm-hmm. And that is, how do I conduct myself in a social situation in a way that other neurotypical people are going to, or that other people who are neurotypical are going to receive and accept it the right way. Mm-hmm. And everything you do in a social interaction, from waving my hands to taking facial expressions to tone of voice to posture, it's a huge contrivance and it's work. So it becomes natural to most people. It's just what they do. And cool people do it really well. But for somebody on the spectrum, you've got to fake it all.
Yeah, acting normal.
There's a song by Rush, you know the band?
Yes.
Limelight. And it's written by Neil Peart. And I only speculate about people who have passed on, so I've got a sense he was probably on the spectrum. But the line is something like, all the world's indeed a stage, and we are merely players, performers and portrayers, each another's audience. And he talks at length in the song about not being able to treat strangers as friends and being able to fake an affect and all that. So it seems like he's struggling with masking a lot in the song, and I have no idea, but that was what I took from it.
Yeah. You describe meltdowns as an overwhelming experience. Can you describe meltdowns? What typically triggers a meltdown?
Generally, it's when you're emotionally overwhelmed to the point that you can't manage your behavior anymore. And so you see it in the movie Rain Man when he's trying to get on the airplane and he's kind of forced and he starts losing it. That's a meltdown. Or I've seen it they did kind of actually probably the best portrayal I've seen in media is, what's the TV show where the doctor is autistic? Anyway, there's a TV show where a doctor is autistic and he's a surgeon, and he is eventually banned from surgery because of his autism, and he's always wanted to be a surgeon, and he has a complete meltdown, and it's a pretty good portrayal on television. So, what is actually happening? Like, there's a threshold you cross that it's just like, yeah, a switch flips. It's like blue screen, essentially. Yeah, kind of for the brain algorithm. So a switch flips, you go kind of a primitive brain, your frontal cortex shuts down to an extent, I think, so you don't have the benefit of decision-making and filtering. You're very reptilian brain in that state. And it's really a panic state. And so it's a panic and a fight or flight response to not being able to tolerate the current reality. And perhaps it's been so frustrating, or you've been so randomized, or you had a bad travel day, or an argument at work, or whatever. It's added up to the point that something has now triggered you, and your brain loses its ability to adequately moderate your behavior.
What about love and relationships? What are some of the challenges of that? And, there's a show, Love on the Spectrum.
I've heard of it. I've not seen it, but I've heard of it.
Because certain aspects, like literal interpretation of things, it just makes the complexity of relationships, of romantic relationships, even more explicit in that context.
I've been married 31 years and together for 37, so a long history there. And I think our first indication that we knew we were very different was we were sitting in the car one night out front of the house at dark, and across the street, there's kind of a nice house that has these big brick pillars that are linked by like anchor chains, and it forms a fence around the yard. And I'm looking at these things because they're about 2 feet square and I got a capstone. And I'm like, I wonder if they're hollow or are they backfilled? Are they filled with concrete or what? And my now wife looks at me and she's like, what's wrong with you? Why do you have a place in your head that cares about that?
Yeah.
And we
That's
just
great.
knew in the moment that I was passionately involved in caring and she was passionately involved in why would you even worry about that kind of thing? We knew we were very different. So
Yeah, very specific, seemingly irrelevant details.
But I was never good with people. I don't get it when people like me, I guess. And so and my son is the same way because they all don't fall very far from the tree. And I got him a T-shirt that says, "If you're hitting on me, please let me know and be specific because I'm clueless." And it's very similar for me. I mean, I had to be around a long time and kind of grow on people because I had no game, because I had no ability to do the social dances that whole thing requires. So my only option is to just be myself, and that works for some people.
Were you able to say like I love you, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, her family was way more open with that kind of thing than mine was. And so it was a growing period for me. But yeah, it's not a problem I have.
Okay. All right. But it seems like unimportant. Like, what is that actually accomplishing?
Well, now we do a lot of affirmation and checking. Like in the last couple of years, we do a thing where she'll just be like, "You good?" I'm like, "Yeah." And there's 2 steps to that. There's the "Are you good?" And then there's my response. Because if I'm like, "Yeah," she knows something's up.
Yeah.
And so there's always this pinging back and forth because there's not the ability to read people just from looking at them to know what's going on. So we have this explicit check mechanism, I think, where we've developed that.
So there's a vast chasm between yeah and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's subtlety of human communication. You've written about the experience that people have of feeling, quote, a little bit autistic. Could you elaborate on this concept?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, maybe 10 to 20% of the population, is somewhere on the autism spectrum, but isn't impacted by enough that it rises to the level of a disorder. But they still have many of the characteristics that arise from autism. And I think if they can understand and identify and manage some of those behaviors in an optimal way, they can both leverage them to take advantage of some of the skills and mediate some of the deficits and problems that come with it. And I wrote it mostly for my kids because none of them, as far as I know, have ASD, but they've all got certain aspects of my behavior that are particularly related to it. So I thought I'd write a little manual for them, basically.
Why do you think so many programmers, like excellent, like great programmers and great engineers, are on the spectrum?
I think it's that single-minded focus and the ability to reduce a problem and to be ultimately curious about what's inside stuff. That's been an obsession for me my whole life. What's inside? I got to take my mom's oven apart because I got to know how the flip clock works. And I think that's a good habit to have if you're going to be a programmer.
And being willing, being excited to get into the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.